Hi, listeners. Once again, this is retired Lieutenant Colonel Samsudeen Sarr, former commander of the Gambia National Army, being back again on this Monday, the 30th of October 2023. Continuing in my program of reading my book, Testimony of a Gambian Military Officer and a Diplomat. Today, as I told you, I'll be reading chapter 11, and it's titled, From a School Teacher to a Military Officer. Sitting alone in cell number 1 of confinement block number 4, which happened to be the Gambia's sole death row facility within Mile 2's central prisons, my mind was consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts. On that second day of my detention, 28 July 1994, one particular thought dominated my consciousness. I found myself almost regretting my decision to pursue a career as a military officer in the Gambia rather than staying in the teaching field. The reflection took me back to 1981, a distant 13 years in the past. In 1981, following the failed coup of the PPP government by the Gambia Field Force led by Kufang, significant changes started to happen in the Gambia, including the prospect of a confederation with Senegal. I was at the time a dedicated school teacher with a great love for teaching and reading, and most importantly, writing. In fact, I was planning to write my second book after successfully completing the first one, Meet Me in Conakry. However, encouraged and sponsored by my family members, especially my sisters, I decided to leave the teaching career for further studies in the United States of America. Upon arriving in Maryland with a United States visitor's visa, since I didn't have an I-20 to obtain a student's visa, I received an unexpected assistance from members of the Gambia Embassy in Washington, D.C. My brother-in-law was the financial attaché at the mission married to my sister, and with the help of their colleagues, they secured me a diplomatic visa. The new status allowed me to obtain a social security number, a crucial form of identification in the USA. It facilitated various aspects of life and made a major turning point in my American journey. I soon moved to Atlanta, Georgia, with my diplomatic visa valid for only 1 year. But within that year, I secured a job at the Atlanta Hilton Hotel and Towers, as it was commonly called, and pursued a college program at DeKalb Community College, balancing work and studies. I worked at the hotel first as a housekeeper and janitor, but eventually becoming a security guard. The position of security guard provided better pay and aligned with my academic pursuits. Many Gambians, despite United States immigration regulations, found employment at the Atlanta Hilton Hotel once they obtained valid social security numbers and state identification cards. The Gambians also presented themselves as citizens from the Virgin Islands. Federal legislation granted individuals from the Virgin Islands the same rights as American citizens. To a great extent, we bore a physical resemblance to the islanders. The security department had easier responsibilities such as patrolling the 22 floors of the hotel, preventing and reporting minor thefts from guest rooms, and addressing maintenance affairs. During quieter moments, I could study in vacant rooms. I worked diligently and in very challenging conditions and took my job seriously. For the better part of 3 years, I found myself constantly juggling between my school and my work commitments. Weekdays would often require me to rise at 5 a.m., leave my apartment at 6 a.m., and not return home until as late as 11 p.m. On many occasions, I would have to dedicate my precious late night hours to completing college assignments or studying for upcoming tests. This is why I persist in emphasizing that the pursuit of success in the USA can be an arduous journey, particularly for foreigners, especially those hailing from third world African countries. In 1985, I successfully completed my college program at DeKalb College and was planning to continue my studies at one of the Atlanta universities when 3 major problems altered my fate. First, the new director of the hotel security department, Mr. Bruce Bassett, displayed a significant animosity towards me, which resulted in insurmountable difficulties in my work. At some point, I realized that it wasn't a matter of if Bruce would fire me, but rather a matter of when. I may have been mistaken, but I speculated that Mr. Bassett's behavior as a typical white Southerner might have been rooted in prejudice against foreigners and Africans. It is undeniably clear that people of African or Gambian descent who have achieved modest success in America without engaging in illegal activities or illicit trade will openly attest that their journey was marked by an arduous struggle, rife with unimaginable hardship and heart-wrenching setbacks. Being an immigrant, black, and worst of all African, pose unmistakable barriers to experiencing fair treatment and equal opportunities in a country that continues to grapple with institutionalized racial, gender, and religious discrimination, despite decades of enacting laws to combat such practices. I had been employed at the Hilton Hotel since my arrival in the United States of America, and losing my job at the hands of Bruce would have been a significant setback. Moreover, neither Bruce nor my co-workers were aware that my diplomatic visa had expired 3 years ago, rendering me an undocumented immigrant in the country. So when close friends in the department attempted to persuade me to sue Bruce for racial discrimination if he ever terminated my employment, I realized that this wouldn't be a favorable course of action given my current status. Consequently, I began contemplating the idea of returning home after 4 years of living abroad. Back then, America seemed a wall away from the Gambia, and the only means of communicating with our families back at home were landline telephones. Unfortunately, such communication was outrageously expensive and beyond my limited income and financial responsibilities. The luxuries of internet services mobile phones and all the sophisticated means of communications we have today didn't exist then. Letters I sent to the Gambia would take at least 3 months before I receive a response, which made me yearn for home and consider returning to work for my country. My second setback revolved around my love life. I had a relationship with an American Jamaican woman named Frances, who provided me with the companionship I needed for 2 years. She hailed from Queens in New York City, but relocated to Atlanta and used to work as a waitress at the hotel's coffee house where I first met her. Unfortunately, our relationship took a distressing turn as she began exhibiting erratic behavior. This behavior led to discord as she confessed to using hard drugs, specifically cocaine, with individuals she claimed were her cousins. Regrettably, this marked the end of our relationship, leaving me feeling quite lonely for a while. It wasn't long until I met Fanta. She recently arrived from the Gambia and, as usual, secured her first job as a receptionist at the Hilton Hotel. She resided in the Campbellton Road neighborhood, where a majority of the city's small Gambian community had rented apartments, including myself. I believe I met her in the very first week she started working at the hotel. We happily dated, and I believe she might be the perfect woman to marry and build a life in America. However, to my profound disappointment, when I proposed to her, she declined, citing irreconcilable traditional customs that prohibited her from marrying without the presence of her parents in Banjul. Despite my efforts to persuade her to reconsider, she remained resolute in her decision. In the end, I made the decision that upon returning home and securing a job, I would promptly seek a life partner and begin my family. The third and final turning point in my life occurred during the very week I was taking my final exams for my graduation. I received a rare and unusual telephone call from my brother, Dulai, in the Gambia, informing me that our father, Alhaji Mamadou Sarr, had passed away the previous night and had just been buried at the Serakunda cemeteries. That night, I went home and wept. A rare occurrence, as I couldn't recall the last time I had shed tears in my life. I had not been aware of his illness and hadn't spoken to him since the day I left home in 1981. It was at this moment that I realized if Bruce Bassett and Fanta couldn't make me reconsider my life's path, the death of my father certainly would. I was determined to return home and take care of the family, being my father's eldest son in our large extended family. On November 11, 1985, I boarded a British Airways aircraft at Atlanta International Airport, which flew me to London and finally to the Gambia. I was back home. Upon my arrival in the Gambia in November 1985, I officially joined the Gambia National Army in the subsequent month of December. However, my military training didn't kick off until early 1986. My decision to enlist in the Gambia National Army wasn't driven by a fervent desire to become a soldier or by the superficial call of patriotism to defend the country's sovereignty as a true Gambian soldier, as is often emphasized. Instead, my decision to join the Gambia National Army was motivated by a desire for job security and a stable income. It was also fueled by my aspiration to pursue a career that will enable me to continue my education and financially support my disadvantaged family. Despite holding a teaching certification, I had doubts that my associate degree in engineering will provide me with a satisfactory job in that field. Nonetheless, it served as a stepping stone towards a new career or higher education. I was resolute in my determination to seize available opportunity, regardless of its source or method. This led me to first explore two government departments, but I ultimately chose the Gambia National Army due to the appealing offer they presented. In a political landscape dominated by the PPP and entrenched authorities, I relied on my determination to navigate the system. My initial endeavor was to approach the education department to address my assessment in my previous profession, where I had taught at two Gambia secondary technical schools before leaving for the United States of America without formally resigning. This resulted in my dismissal by Mr. John Adams, the principal of Latrikunda Secondary Technical School. Undeterred, I formally applied for a position through the Public Service Commission, known as the PSC, which led to an interview with a panel of elderly men. They raised concerns about my previous dismissal and questioned the likelihood of history repeating itself if I were rehired. I apologized for my past actions and assured them that I had learned from my mistakes. While their inquiries adhered to protocol, it was clear that they recognized the value of my service and intended to hire me. I capitalized on the dramatic aspect of my narrative to emphasize my dedication, declaring, I was and always will be a teacher. A week later, I received an appointment letter indicating that I would be assigned to teach at a high school, with the specific location to be determined by the Chief Education Officer in Banjul. However, a conversation with the Chief Education Officer revealed that I will need to teach for a minimum of 2 years to complete my studies abroad. A prolonged period that did not align with my aspirations. Since my field of study was agricultural engineering, I attempted to contact the Gambia Agriculture Department in the hope of receiving a more favorable response. But my encounter with the person in charge there was disappointing. I then visited the newly established Gambia National Army Barracks within the same location at Yundum. Intrigued by the prospect of becoming an army engineer, this interest stemmed from discussions with friends who spoke highly of the opportunities in the new and growing Gambian army, with young recruits often being sent abroad for advanced education. At the barracks, I was welcomed by a private soldier who directed me to the British Army Training Team office for an interview. Interestingly, the Army Barracks now was located on the premises of the Gambia College, where I had previously studied for 3 years to become a school teacher. The college had since moved to Brikama, approximately 5 miles away. During my visit, I met Major Ken Wright, a British officer who provided detailed information about joining the Gambia National Army. The British Army training team, known as BAT, consisted of 4 members, with Major Ken Wright in command, deputized by an Irish major called Major Rob John, and supported by 2 non-commissioned officers, Sergeant Major Allen and Sergeant Major Payton, responsible for drill and tactics, respectively. Major Wright conducted the conversation during our meeting. He first had to confirm my Gambian citizenship and review my credentials, expressing confidence in my potential to become an officer if I pass the officer cadet exams, which assess both academic and physical abilities. Unlike other ranks, cadet officers, he told me, we are not bound by a fixed term of service and could resign their commission at any time. They could continue in active service until the retirement age of civil servants, which was 55 years at the time. Now it is 60. There were also provisions for a prospective reserve force, the details of which was only known to the British. Major Wright expressed interest in offering me an opportunity owing to my strong academic background. However, he discouraged me from pursuing a career as an engineer, explaining that it was a limited field with restricted advancement prospects. The engineering division primarily served as a support unit for the infantry, the main operational force of the nascent army. At that time, the infantry force of the Gambia National Army consisted of just a company-sized unit comprising roughly 200 men, with aspirations to expand its ranks into a full battalion totaling 1,000 soldiers. With your qualification, Major Wright emphasized, you could one day become the commander of this growing army. I can also assure you one thing, Mr. Sarr, Major Wright went on. If you successfully pass the officer cadet selection exam, you will be sent to Fort Benning, Georgia in the United States of America for a basic officer training course. Major Wright was genuinely friendly, going out of his way to highlight all the appealing aspects to encourage my enlistment. He requested my commitment to return for the cadet exams scheduled in late December 1985. Naturally, I resolved to give it a shot. The pace of events was astonishing. Only weeks after my initial meeting with Major Wright, I began my training as a Gambia National Army cadet officer. I took the officer cadet examination test and successfully passed it, standing out among more than a dozen prospective candidates. That was exactly how and when I transformed my life from a former school teacher to a military officer. But 6 years later, here I was in the Gambia National Army as a captain, experiencing a troubling incident of being arrested and detained at the Mile 2 central prisons of the country for no given reasons. The incident involved 2 sub-lieutenants, Kending Singate and Keba Topper, who played pivotal roles in overthrowing the 30-year-old PPP government. They now treat us, the senior officers, as though we were their greatest adversaries and the primary justification for their seizure of power. I found myself confined to cell number 1 alongside approximately 30 fellow officers, each held in separate cells within confinement block number 4. And that ends chapter 11, folks. Till next time, you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for your attention.